Oh, farmer has 97 sheep, okay? And he told me, he says, I got 97 sheep. I got 100 when I round them up.
Pretty good.
Hey, how's everybody tonight? Good, my name's Dave. Hi. To see you tonight. So we have typically a triple header. We have our special presentation, which I'll introduce in just a moment. And then shortly after 8 o'clock, so roughly 10-ish minutes after our presentation, we have a planetarium show about the night sky. And you can come with requests. I'm like the DJ of the skies. I take requests. So if there's something you would like to see or learn about in the night sky, you can share that. I will ask you as we begin the show in the planetarium. And then if it's clear out, I don't know that it's going to clear up or not enough, but we typically, when it's clear, we would have the New Hampshire Astronomical Society here with their telescopes. And they would come and entertain you with showing you all manner of things live and probably not in color, but live and in black and white, all the eyepieces of the telescope. So every first Friday of every month, check our website, starhop, starhop.com, and find out what our special presentation is. And again, there's a planetarium show, which changes every month because the sky changes by 2 hours every month. And then if it's clear, we have the New Hampshire Astronomical Society. Any questions about that? All right, well, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you Sarah and Bridget. Sarah and Bridget are with the Caterpillar Lab from Marlborough, New Hampshire. How many of you know where Marlborough, New Hampshire is? I learned something.
Now you have a reason to come and
Yeah.
see Marlborough.
All right, well, please welcome Sarah and Bridget.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right. Well, hi, everyone. I hope we're starting to enjoy some of the slowly warming up weather and getting towards more spring weather, which we're going to talk a bit about some of the things you can find in the springtime, some of the caterpillars and moths. But I just want to tell you a little bit about the lab first. So the Caterpillar Lab's in Marlborough, New Hampshire. We are actually moving right down the road, right over the line into Dublin, New Hampshire, and hopefully we will be open there by the end of the month, which will be pretty cool. Hopefully. And the Caterpillar Lab is a pretty unique place. It's one of a kind. We take care of and educate about native New England caterpillars. We have special guests sometimes as well from a little bit farther south or a little bit farther west, but mostly we focus on New England species. And we, in the summertime, are taking care of up to 600 different species at a time or more, always probably more. We are actually, we discover some new species every once in a while or new life histories. It's a really cool place and you can visit us, but mostly what we do is actually these traveling programs, and we travel around and tell people about how cool caterpillars are and how important they are to our ecosystem. And so that's a bit what we're going to do today, but we're also going to kind of focus a bit on, what better place? We're at planetarium, nighttime, nocturnal creatures that you can see, and kind of the tools and methods and how we find them and ways that you can go out and find them, and a little bit about what's happening this time of year with caterpillars. So Sarah's going to kind of take it from here for a little bit and talk about a little overarching caterpillar stuff, and we'll be off. Great.
All right. Oh, perfect. That was lame. All right. So when we think about caterpillars, I think people tend to think butterflies first. However, that is not the majority of what caterpillars become. We click through a couple slides. So we have about 800 different species of butterflies here in the United States. There are about 12,000 species of butterflies and moths, all combined in the US. And in the world, this is kind of an old number now, there's about 180,000 different species of moths and butterflies combined across the world. And the vast majority of those are moths. Most of those are things called the erebid or the noctuid moths. So those are a lot of things like the fuzzy caterpillar that you might have met in the fall, or like our woolly bears, or these weird, strange kind of bark mimic caterpillars. Some of you might know them as cutworms or darts. You might know them as tussocks or tigers. And we're going to be talking a lot about those groups today because a lot of those are our springtime caterpillars. I don't know if I threw in any photos of our inchworms or our geometrids, but that's our other big group of moths and butterflies. It's actually our biggest group of moths and butterflies worldwide are the geometrids. And almost all of the caterpillars, I won't say all, but almost all of the caterpillars that you might encounter on a warm spring night like tonight are going to be either geometrids, our inchworms, or our noctuids, our cutworms and darts. So we're going to spend a lot of time talking about them. Here in New Hampshire, we have between 4,000 and 6,000 different moths, different caterpillar species that you might run into, depending on where you're at in the state and whose estimates you're counting. Some of those are very, very tiny. Some are tiny enough to fit inside of a leaf and eat the very smallest parts of a leaf, the cells. Some of them are so small that they can't actually eat the cells themselves. They have to use their mouth parts to kind of act like a blender and juice the cells, and then they drink the juice. Some are big enough that they turn into moths that are as big as both of my hands combined. So we're going to get a few of those tonight. Next slide. See. We're going to meet a few tonight. But I did want to talk a little bit about why we're here and why we're talking about mites specifically. So when we go out looking for caterpillars, we are using both kind of our experience as naturalists and people who have studied caterpillars and insects for a long time. So we're using things like the plants they eat, their seasons, their habitats, but we're also just generally trying to get to know who is living in our environment with us. And the best way to do that really is to go out and sort of meet them where they're at and meet them on sort of their own time scale. Now, for most insects, that's going to be nighttime. Most of our insects are nocturnal. They're awake at night and asleep during the day. And we tend to think about that as moths, that the caterpillar stages are just as active at night. So if you are someone, well, who likes to bird? Anyone a birder in here? Awesome. If you are a birder, do you have a life list? A list of all the birds that you've seen in your life. All right, we've got at least one person, one fellow birder. There are folks who are mothers and people who keep a life list of all the moths and butterflies that they've seen in their lives. And one of the best ways to add more species or more individuals to your list is to go out at night. So part of what we're doing tonight is teaching you some skills and some ways to go out and find more animals living in your habitats, who's living in your yards, who is sharing the trails with you. We're also talking about these animals because a lot of them are pollinators. So remember those big groups I talked about, the noctuids, the cutworms and darts, the geometrids, the inchworms, and the arabids, the tigers and bears. Those are massive groups of pollinating moths flying around at night in our spring and summer environments, pollinating flowers, producing fruit and seeds for other animals to enjoy. And then the caterpillars themselves are really, really important food sources for a lot of our springtime animals. So you may have heard that birds rely a lot on caterpillars to feed their young when they're nesting, but a lot of our overwintering birds, things like chickadees and kinglets, really rely on them as a constant wintertime food source as well. Next slide. So our big point that we hope you walk away with is there's a lot going on outside. I don't expect you to remember everything that we talked about tonight, but I do want to leave you with a sense that there is more out there and more to see and more to discover than you might have ever thought there was, even if you're someone who's spent your life studying these insects, just like many of us have. All of these insects have very complicated stories. They feed hundreds to thousands of other animals. They interact with dozens and hundreds of plants, and they're one of the reasons that our landscapes here in New England look the way that they look. So big point, diversity drives diversity, and we want to leave you with the sense that there's a lot of diversity, even in our springtime landscape on a kind of cold and wet night like tonight. All right, so how do we see these animals? When we want to go out and find which insects are using our habitats, or maybe what insect habitats we're using, we have a few different tools that we can use. So the very kind of first tool that we might use to go out and find moths and butterflies, well, mostly moths, is something called a moth light. So we'll go out at night and set up kind of constructed trap to create a situation where we're pulling in a bunch of these different moths from the landscape so we can see who is here and how much diversity we might have in a space. So that would be a really big sheet like this with a really, really bright mercury vapor bulb on it. And this mercury vapor bulb puts out a ton of UV light. And that's really what's attracting our moths. They're not really attracted to bright light necessarily. You can put a really bright fluorescent light outside that doesn't put out very much UV, and the moths aren't really going to come. So they're using something about UV, something similar to sunlight or moonlight, and that is something that they're kind of pulled to. And then we put a big white sheet so that we can see all the moths that land on it. If you get lucky and you have something very cool, like Bridget's favorite moth, the IO moth, it stands out really nicely against that white sheet. And you get to look and see all the different creatures, and maybe all of the different fine details of their bodies. We'll skip that video. So for us at the Caterpillar Lab, we use these moth sheets or these mothing events, both as a way to count biodiversity, all the different species that we might see, but also as a way to build community. These are events that are kind of strange. They draw people who are maybe a little bit more on the nerdy side, who want to see all these different weird animals. Maybe some of us want to learn all their names. Maybe some people want to go out and take photos of all the different insects they see. But the point is, at the end of the day, we're all here in a little spot together at night doing this really weird thing, getting covered in moths and midges and beetles. And we're all there excited, trying to share this information with each other. So we go and we moth, both to collect species data and biodiversity data, but we also do these traveling programs like this, where we set up at night, we let all the moths come in, we talk about what they're feeding on, their life cycles, maybe we talk about new species that we might see or moths that we don't recognize. And we'll just set up something casual where we have, you know, a couple different lights set up. Maybe we'll have some microscopes for people to look at the really tiny moths. And this is actually a photo from an event called McAuliffe-Shepard, which is a national, I guess international now, conference that happens in Southern Ohio each year that draws hundreds of people just to see the moths. And some of these are lifelong lepidopterists, or people who study moths and butterflies. Some of these are people who just happen to read the Night Magic book back there and learn that Mothapalooza existed and wanted to come celebrate weird nighttime biodiversity with us. These are also atmospheres where you get to see really, really unique insects, really up close. So this is actually a photo of my leg at Mothapalooza. And this is something called the Jamaican sphinx moth, or Smerinthus jamaicensis. And up here, it's a very, very rare moth. It's one that we almost never get to see. So it comes in, lands on my leg, and suddenly 30, 40 people from this conference swarm me, and they're all taking pictures. They're all trying to get the best photo of this moth to add it to their iNaturalist life list. And they can say, I saw this on this night, on this day. We also get to set up really weird things like our moth stick hors d'oeuvre tray, where if you don't want to handle a moth and damage their wings, you might put a bunch of sticks around and pass them to your friends so they can take good photos and maybe see the same species that you're seeing. And these are all the animals that are coming in from the habitats around our moth light. So we're not seeing them really in their sort of normal behaviors or on their normal plants. We're seeing them get pulled into light where we can observe them on our terms. This is a really great sheet of what early spring or maybe late spring up here might look like. We'll have species like our Luna moths, maybe our most famous, and then all of this different diversity of all these different moth species. And we could sit here for an hour and I could try to name a lot of them, but to be honest, I don't know most of these moths. The Luna moth is probably the easiest one. This is one of my favorite photos. I also tend to get a little bit in trouble for adding this to our talks, because this is one of our little sparrows, and that individual is a little bit confused. A bird like that isn't normally a nocturnal bird, but because we've turned on this super, super bright, high-powered 400-watt light, we woke up this little young bird, and it decided to come in and start foraging at our sheets. We get things like frogs at our sheets, licking the moths. We had bears show up, we've had owls sweeping by, bats catching all the moths. So when we create these light traps, we really are trapping these insects. And we're not necessarily killing them, but we are creating sort of a different environment, and we're pulling them out of their natural habitats and their natural behaviors. So when we're seeing them like this, we're not actually seeing them in the context that we would normally see them with, and we're not associating them with the plants and normal predators that might have at night. So the next section we're going to talk about is how to actually see them in context with the behaviors and plants and their ecology, their whole system that they belong with. Yeah.
Well, this that big moth that is green.
Oh, the really big green one? This is a Luna moth. In real life, they're about the size of my hand. So they're one of the biggest moths that we have in the East. One of the biggest we have up here in New Hampshire. Their cousins, the Cyclopia moths, can get about as big as both of my hands put together. We have 2 scorpion moths in the back. They're a little bit small, to be honest, for some of the wild ones that I've seen. And we expect to see those usually in June around here.
All right. So we were talking about moth light, how not necessarily the most natural way to experience some of these animals. So something that has become a pretty regular tool of a lot of us at the Caterpillar Lab and a lot of other lepidopterists and people who are interested in caterpillars are actually UV flashlights. So about 10 years ago now, 2016, at that event that Sarah was talking about, Mothapalooza, a school teacher came up to us and was like, hey, so caterpillars glow under UV light. And Sam, the executive director, was like, what? And basically she brought in a light and we shone it on some of the caterpillars that we had with us at Mothapalooza, and we're like, well, gosh darn it, these do glow under the UV light. How has nobody known this before? So that was 10 years ago. And now, like I said, we, as a Caterpillar Lab, use this as a tool all the time for ourselves. So this is kind of a regular run-of-the-mill one that we often use. If I turn it on, you can see it's got a little bit of a purple light, and like the white's picked up over there on that little sign. And yeah, now there are whole labs designated to that UV light and using that for caterpillar research and you know, being able to go out and spot things and collect and all of that. Even in England, there's some endangered hair streak butterfly caterpillars, and they actually have a community science project where people go out with these UV flashlights and they go and they see if they can find the black hair streak and a couple other ones that are listed as vulnerable. And they're able to get numbers and see how many are out there and kind of get more information about these caterpillars, and they weren't able to do that before. And until we found this out, nobody was doing that. So now this is a really, really great tool for experiencing kind of creatures out in the wild, but also getting the numbers that maybe we wouldn't have seen before, because a lot of our caterpillars are active at nighttime. And plus it's also just really fun. It's a little less structured than some of our moth lights. So for that, you don't have to, but we normally set up like a big sheet, and it's kind of a bit more of like an event. Where in this case, you just get yourself one of these, and you can get them off Amazon, or you can buy them from the lab. And you can just go out by yourself or with some friends and just shine this up in the trees. And caterpillars will just, I mean, you can see the difference. Like, this is just with a regular flashlight, and I mean, we know what we're looking for, so we see this caterpillar, and yeah, it's there, but it kind of blends in with the leaf, right? And then we go over here, and it's a bit brighter, or I don't know what the next picture is, but yeah, so this kind of, just blends in with the leaves. We go over here, it's just popping out, right? The color is really, really showing that there's something over there. And it's just become so helpful and so fun. But also, like I said, for conservation purposes, kind of figuring out what's out there, what they're doing. New discoveries aren't always new species. Sometimes it's things like new behaviors. And when we're using this and we're going out and we're just finding things on leaves, as I mentioned, it's more of that kind of natural behavior. We're seeing them do what they would normally be doing. Sometimes you're just seeing them eat a leaf. Sometimes you're seeing them interact with other creatures. And people often ask, why are they fluorescing? What's causing that? There's kind of two lanes of thought. To be honest, I don't think we're totally sure. It's, there's definitely more to be studied. Some people think it could be a defense. Others think that it's actually maybe just kind of accidental. Just some of the pigments that they have do happen to fluoresce, and that just ends up being beneficial for scientists. This is a skip slug caterpillar that I did find out and about, and actually until we found this, we weren't totally sure if these would glow. So I don't know if you can backtrack again, but this is what it looks like without any UV light on it. And if we go next, you can see all of those kind of veining textures that were on it. Those all really just light up when they're under the UV. So now we know that these actually do light up pretty well, and we can now go out and find these guys too. A lot of other things fluoresce as well, which before you're a bit more practiced and your eye is a little bit more used to like spotting the caterpillars with it, you might stumble across a lot of bird poop, or there's been plenty of those where I'm like, oop, and I'm like, oh, it's bird poop. Or you might find a lot of spiders seem to fluoresce. We don't have scorpions around here, but scorpions fluoresce. we'll show lichen, you know, a lot of things look cool under the light. So even if you're not necessarily finding caterpillars, you might be finding other cool things too. This is an elfin?
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is a pine elfin. And you can see that there's certain parts and structures on the caterpillars that do seem to fluoresce maybe more than other parts. And maybe it's the parts that are harder on the caterpillars. Again, we don't really know.
I do want to add a bit. This pine elfin is really closely related to the
The
hair
hair
streaks
streaks,
in
yeah.
the endangered hair streaks in England that they're using the blacklights to study.
Mhm.
And these caterpillars are about the size of one of my thumbnails.
Yeah,
So
so
in the
tiny.
wild, they're a bright green caterpillar sitting on a bright green plant about the size of your thumbnail. And imagine how difficult that is to find. Things like these pine elfins, we see the butterflies all the time. And we almost never see the caterpillars unless we go out with flashlights like this that help us use a different sense to see them.
And that's a great point with again, with discovery, how I said, oh, so, you know, discovery is not always finding a brand new species. Sometimes it's finding new behaviors. Sometimes it's finding new, what we call life history. So there's a lot of stories of people having seen the moth or butterfly a bunch, but never seen the caterpillar, or vice versa. So again, this is a really helpful tool for finding some of those caterpillars. This is a polyphemus. And that's one of the ones that we have in the back there. And yeah, you can just see some of the colors just really highlighted from this. So if you were to shine this up in a tree, you just start seeing, you know, things really catch your eye. This is an eastern tiger swallowtail, and it's one of those things again where only certain parts of it, some of these little features are glowing, and not the whole thing is like some of our other caterpillars. So again, interesting of why they've got these fake eye spots. So those are glowing a little bit. Maybe that has something to do with something. Another pine species, another pine feeder. It does look like a snake. We do think that's what they're trying to do. And a lot of these pine feeders do have like these lighter stripes going down their bodies, which again, I don't know if this is proven, but I think it's because it looks like light shining through pine needles when they're not glowing like this. But that seems to really pick up the UV light. And that's an elm sphinx, one of my favorites. This is a whole group of red humped.
Red or orange, there's no way to tell what these are as caterpillars. That's too way down to
But yeah, and these are ones that all hang out as a group. And I think one of the fun things about going out at night, in both of these circumstances, but especially with this, you're just kind of walking through the woods with a flashlight. And a lot of times we do rely a lot on our sense of sight to be finding these things. But when you're out at night, some of your other senses heighten as well, which is kind of cool. So we have that whole group of caterpillars, and sometimes if there is a large group or just like a really big caterpillar, you might even hear their frass or their poop falling down and hitting leaves. It sounds a little bit like rain pitter-pattering on a roof. So if you're standing there, you might hear a little something, you're like, well, it's not raining, so maybe there's like a large caterpillar or a large group of caterpillars somewhere, and then you can use your light to confirm or deny if that's the case. That's a little
the fast, prominent caterpillar. In real life, this is again about the size of a thumbnail. They get to about the size of my thumb when they're fully grown, but we would never see this without one of these flashlights at night.
Yeah, what?
Yeah. Pretty big when it's fully grown.
This is maybe a Luna or maybe a Poly. It looks like it's eating a leaf. And that just leads me to another story that I'm just very, very proud to share because I just think it's really cool. But talking about using your sense of hearing, when certain caterpillars get to a decent size, you can actually hear them munching on leaves. So that's another case of, you know, when you're outside quiet, just kind of scanning the trees, you can also be listening. And last year I actually was doing this and I heard crunching and I was like, there's a caterpillar eating nearby. And I was like, it's got to be a decent size because I can hear. So it must be fairly big. And in this case, it wasn't really a caterpillar that fluoresces too well. It was actually a twig mimicking geo that I found. But I used my light, trying to, I was like, I feel like it's over here, and use this. I saw a little something with this, but then I switched to my real flashlight, and I did end up seeing that one because it doesn't actually fluoresce too well. But yeah, I mean, when you're out there, you start to notice all different things rather than just the things you're seeing. This is a set of caterpillar eggs, and it's another great you know, part of this going out with the UV flashlight is that you get to see all life stages. So I found a monarch chrysalis that was fluorescing really well under the UV. These eggs are fluorescing really well. You can also see moths out nectaring at some of the plants out there. So this is an example of a chrysalis here. So it's not just the caterpillars that fluoresce. There are multiple life stages that fluoresce as well. So again, it's that really great part of seeing things, doing their natural behaviors in their natural location. You can really connect them, the plants that they're feeding on. You really get to see full life cycles and get to interact with them in a way that you don't normally get to interact with them. This is also this is a imperial, yeah.
So a caterpillar that's now extinct here in northern New Hampshire.
Yeah.
That's a question.
Yeah.
Are the caterpillars just like that you would expect the fluorescent that don't?
Oh, that's a good question.
Absolutely, yes.
Actually,
Yeah.
really.
So,
I'm gonna turn off the lights for this one. So everyone, the lights are gonna go down, don't be too surprised.
So this is a tobacco hornworm. Normally a little bit more green in the wild than this one is right here. But when we think of like the Polyphemus, which is a very green caterpillar, or the the Cecropia, then these would catch your eye pretty well. But this one surprisingly doesn't actually do too much. I mean, yes, it's brighter because I have a light on it.
Well, your hands is bright.
But my hand is brighter than the caterpillar, right? So yeah, you'd think that from some of the other ones that we saw that are really green, that this would fluoresce. Yeah. Yes, it's the one that you can still see on like your tomato plants or your pepper plants sometimes. I just want to quickly run to the back and grab the Polyphemus and do the
Oh,
same
yeah.
thing, because I just want to show you the contrast between that one that does not really fluoresce and then
No, one can continue with this. So if you get a caterpillar that doesn't fluoresce, is it, have you seen them when the eggs fluoresce?
Yes, so that does sometimes happen where either different structures on the body might fluoresce or glow under UV at different ages. Sometimes the eggs might glow, but the caterpillar doesn't. Usually the moth stages don't glow, so that maybe says something about the structure of their exoskeleton or their skin at that stage. I tend to fall in the group that this fluorescing under UV is most likely kind of an accidental thing. There are a whole bunch of people that think it's actually a defensive adaptation that caterpillars have evolved in response to some predator. But because we see so much variation like that at different stages, or caterpillars that do or don't fluoresce unexpectedly, I think there's a little bit less of a easy answer than that.
No connection to the plants there.
Not usually. There are some cases where there's things like some of our hummingbird moths, the little ones that you'll actually see during the daytime. Some of those eat things like honeysuckles, where the honeysuckle sap actually fluoresces under UV. The caterpillar will fluoresce, but that's just because a lot of sphinx moths do. But their frass, or their droppings, actually glows really, really brightly. Most caterpillar droppings won't glow at all. So there's some chemical in the honeysuckle that sticks around through the caterpillar's stomach and makes their poop glow. And maybe that really is something that the plant is causing, so that maybe a bird or another animal sees that glowing poop and says, oh, I know there's a caterpillar there, I'm gonna hunt for that. That feels a little like we're anthropomorphizing the plant a little bit too much, but who knows?
I do just want to quickly show, so this is the Polyphemus, another green caterpillar. And you see how parts of that actually do glow quite a bit more than the tobacco hornworm did. So Polyphemus is definitely one that we do see a lot, and we are able to find quite a bit with our UV flashlights. But yeah, you can also see like how weird your fingers look. I don't know what things you can see with the UV light. But yeah, it's become a really, I mean, basically a tool that we don't leave. We don't have it rolling around the back of our car without, rolling in the back of our cars in the summertime. We pretty much all just have a UV flashlight on us so we can be ready to go at nighttime. But yeah, do you want to chat about this
Yeah,
one?
that's not necessarily to say that you have to have a UV flashlight to be able to find some of these animals or to see wild behaviors like that. This is actually a group of cutworm or dart moths. I think these are actually the Eucilia darts, some of which I'll show under the microscope here in a few minutes. And this is actually recorded last spring. I think actually during the first week of April, went out to a big silver maple swamp. And we noticed that a beaver had been working on the maples, cutting down all the maple. And because it was so early in the spring and those trees were cut so freshly, the maple sap was still oozing out of all of these beaver stumps. And all of these moths that are coming in the early spring when there's not very many flowers to nectar at, came to all of this maple sap and started nectaring at the maple sap. So we got to walk around hours looking at all of these moths drinking the maple sugar. And that's something we tend to do a lot. We go out even without the black lights and just spending time out when these animals are actually active, either nectaring at flowers or blowing maple sap taps, or crawling around in the grass like Bridget is looking for here. Those are all ways that we can sort of interact with them in kind of a more wild setting. We also talked a bit about finding new species. This is actually, I'll leave the volume off on this one. This is all just us getting very excited about a very weird caterpillar. So this was actually recorded at a mothing event that we led last summer. And we only had, a couple of moths show up. They were pretty cool. And so we all started looking around for what caterpillars we could find. And we didn't bring any black lights with us. So we were just using our regular flashlights to start searching the sides of this building. And it was covered with all of this lichen and all of this moss. And on some of that lichen was a little tiny green caterpillar that looked just like the lichen itself. And we brought it back and we thought we knew what it was. We thought it was one of our rabbit caterpillars, one of those kind of itchy, woolly bear or tussock moth types. And we thought it was one that we'd seen before on boat docks, feeding on lichen kind of underneath the boat dock. But it turns out it's a brand new zinc lignatha caterpillar. And zinc lignatha is a huge, huge group of these lichen feeders or these litter moths, many of which are completely unknown to science. So this little individual, though the caterpillar looked familiar to us, turned into this moth that we hadn't seen before. So we think it's one of the lichen moths, but we're not exactly sure which lichen moth. And we sent it off to go get its DNA kind of matched up with other records of different moths that we know. And it came back as a species that we don't know yet. So we get to say we discovered a new species right in our backyard. And at some point, if someone wants to, someone will write a whole long paper describing exactly how this caterpillar and moth is different than every other caterpillar and moth in that group, which is a little bit much for us, but we do know some taxonomists, some people who study the differences between species and get to name them. So we're passing this off to someone who actually does that work. So I did want to end our little conversation about going out at night without the UV flashlights with a video of us, again, last April, going out and looking for some of these same caterpillars with just a regular flashlight. These are some caterpillars that I'm actually going to show underneath the microscope here in a moment. And this is another video of us just going out to a little cranberry bog on the side of Route 12, down over a little closer to Keene. And we just went out. It's a pretty cold night for this one. I think it was actually raining before we went out on this exploration, and just started shining our flashlights across the tips of branches and across the tops of plants. Later in the season, when there are actually flowers out, you'll see a lot of moths kind of flying back and forth and nectaring and pollinating. Sometimes you'll see them engaging these really beautiful courtship displays, a little bit like birds might. And a lot of times you'll find caterpillars just sticking off of branches and little twigs, or you'll see a dart kind of crawling across the top of a blueberry plant, eating the buds. And many of these are caterpillars that actually spent the winter hibernating in their caterpillar or in their larval stage. So they're kind of out there just waiting for spring, waiting to be the first to eat the very early buds and flowers. And they are what's feeding a lot of our springtime birds. So as we're waiting for the warblers to come back, as we're seeing all of these birds foraging to build their nests, a lot of what they're feeding on are these little inchworms and darts and noctuids dangling from the branches. This is a much longer video, so if anyone gets really excited about springtime caterpillars, head to our YouTube page. We are going to transition now to a microscope view. So we're going to start showing some actual live caterpillars that we brought with us that are a little bit too small to see in a group setting. We're going to use our digital microscope camera. It has a really big lens with a big magnifier on it, kind of like a telescope, but for small things. And it's going to send an image up to our TV screen. So everything you're seeing on the screen is going to be live and active.
Fun thing about that last caterpillar is that we did find that caterpillar out using a UV flashlight, and it's actually a color form of the spiny oak slug caterpillar, which is normally kind of like has red splotches and a little bit more red and green, and that one was like a very pale icy blue, and we actually think it was trying to be more of a lichen mimic than the other one. So one of our discoveries out with the UV flashlight.
All right. So I'm gonna hold this up. Maybe the only people who can see this are in the front row. But if you think you see a caterpillar on this branch, I want you to raise your hand.
We tell for people.
Does anyone who's sitting there think they see a caterpillar from where you're sitting, either in the front or the back? Ah, maybe some of you have very sharp eyes. Maybe some of you are using a UV flashlight from the very far back and you're seeing something glow. Oh. So. Huh.
Oh, there we go.
This is actually one of the caterpillars that we found well, 2 nights ago on a warm, rainy spring night down in southern New Hampshire. This is one of our porcelain gray moths. And this caterpillar spent the entire winter as a dehydrated, shriveled up caterpillar waiting in the leaf litter. And sometimes on warm nights, they'll crawl up to the top of the branches and check to see if the buds have started. Sometimes they'll scrape the bark off the tips of branches that have just started to regrow. And sometimes, we didn't know this until this year, sometimes they'll even eat lichen off the plants.
So that was just this, oh, there it goes. I was gonna tell you all about body parts, but now it's on the move. But this is its head up here. It's got its 6 true legs there. And I don't know if anyone noticed a little bit of like, it looked like something shiny, like a string coming out. It actually does have, oh, there's a little more of it. So it has silk. So all caterpillars can produce silk. They have a little spinner under their mouth. And this is one of our geometrids, or a lot of people call them the inchworms. You see they only have these 2 legs in the back, kind of makes them inch long. But a lot of these will put an anchor of silk down on the branch. And that's why you'll see them kind of dangling down from the trees. And it's kind of like a little safety harness, and then they can pull themselves back up if they do fall out of the tree. But yeah, little inchworm.
One fun fact about this caterpillar, it does not fluoresce or glow under UV or blacklight. So this is one that we had to use just a regular flashlight and a lot of patience to find. Fortunately, because they do dangle, these are a little bit easier to find than many others. There are some of the darts or the noctuids that I was talking about earlier. And these are some of my favorites because they're kind of the unexpected heroes of the caterpillar world. I think a lot of times people will see little brown or green tubes crawling around in their grass, maybe getting ready to eat some of our garden plants and think, oh, that's not something I want. But these caterpillars feed so many of our other animals, things like our reptiles, like some of our frogs. They'll feed our birds, they'll feed some of our mammals. Yeah,
Yeah, that one's kind of going in there.
And this whole group, every single one of these caterpillars in this box becomes a pollinator as an adult. They have a long proboscis or a long drinking straw tongue, and they are out pollinating some of our early springtime flowers. Did I get this thread to roll over for us?
So if I remember correctly from last year, that picture, if you remember me sitting in the grass with a headlamp on, finding things like this in the grass. This is the stuff I was finding.
From far away, all of these different kind of speckly patterns on their bodies might make them look a little camouflaged and help them blend in with the duff or the stuff kind of underneath the grass, all the dead leaves and dirt. But up close, we start to see all these really remarkable patterns. And some of them even have fake eye spots on their bodies. I'm going to see if I can find one who has these 2 little, almost like orange eyes on their tail. If he wants to cooperate, so we will see. Well, we can kind of see a few of these little orange spots. And maybe this is a little bit like our spotted salamanders this time of year. Maybe it's using these orange and purple and yellow stripes to look like it might be poisonous. And maybe it actually is. It eats a ton of different things outside. So maybe it's picking up something that tastes pretty gross and stores it in its body so other animals think that the caterpillar tastes gross too. Or maybe it's just mimicking something else that has these same colors. Or it's very possible that when we're looking this close up at a caterpillar, we're seeing colors that other animals don't really see when they're looking at it from far away. So maybe it doesn't actually look poisonous at all. All right. So before I dive in and start showing a few more things, and before Bridget comes over here just to show some of what she brought, does anyone have any questions that you would like answered before we start moving on? Something you were wondering, even if it's not something we really talked about yet.
You don't see anyone with question noise.
Perfect. I love that.
The UV lights and the mercury vapor lights. Now, those have a health hazard for children if they haven't been looking at that pole.
Yes, absolutely.
how do you handle that for all the children?
Yeah, that's a great question.
Yeah, so when we do mothing events and UV like, flashlight stuff, we actually do have special UV glasses that we, require the kids that are with us to wear. Well, I guess we strongly suggest it, and tell their parents as well. And honestly, we wear them too, just because sometimes you get too
Yeah.
excited and you have to turn and you look right at the light. But yeah, we do bring safety glasses with us because especially for, humans with developing eyes like kids, it can be.
So with those UV glasses,
Mhm.
you're still able to see the forest.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
so
That's their protection. a little
Yeah.
bit If the child wants to look into the light.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, we do strongly ask people to not look directly at the light.
Oh, I know.
But, you know, sometimes you turn your head to look at something fly by and it catches it. So, yeah, the light, I mean, the glasses are clear. It does offer some protection, so you're still seeing things in the same light you'd be seeing it without the glass.
Now, a regular lantern that you buy, you know, in a single spotlight,
Mhm.
will come sometimes with a red
yeah,
plaster put over that.
Yeah.
Now, that's not the same as UV, I think,
no, yeah.
but is it useful?
Honestly,
It's supposed to be used for night vision.
yeah, so when we're out using different wavelengths of light to search, some of it is about what our eyes can perceive versus what, other animals can perceive. So when we're using red light, for example, to not affect our night vision, the red cones in our eyes work a little bit differently than like the blue and. We have blue and green, no. I don't know that much about eyes, so ignore that. But the way our eyes perceive red light doesn't really affect our ability to perceive bright and dark in the same way that full spectrum wavelengths do. Yeah, he's leaving.
Those kinds of red lights
Yeah, so
can
those,
be used a little bit.
they can be used to help us see, as we're navigating, but they're not very good for finding caterpillars. They're sort of the opposite direction of light. So red light is a little bit, on the other end of the spectrum from UV light. So when we're using UV light, we're using really, really high intensity light to make their bodies send off a glow. The red light is kind of the opposite. It's
So it gets you
slowing
around
things
in the
down.
woods, but it doesn't find it.
Exactly, yeah.
And there's even with our UV flashlights, there's like a 390 nanometers and then 365 nanometers, and we use 365 nanometers because of the shortened wavelength that it offers, and it does, like, you can use the 390 nanometers and you'd be seeing more like light that helps you like actually see and walk around, maybe seeing less of kind of like that blue purpley light, and that's what really catches the caterpillars like
You
fluorescent.
may want to ask somebody else.
Anyway.
I was hoping our little fuzzy Virginia tenuta caterpillar would glow pretty well under the UV with the microscope.
I tell you with a question, real quick.
Yeah.
Right, now, is there a business for you, like in the beginning of the year? I assume now these insects are around.
Mhm.
And farmers with big fields would like to know what's gonna happen with the spring. I mean, when the season progresses, when they should start using tools. I see that as a business.
It could be, I think one of the interesting things that happens when we start talking about native insects and how we interact with the landscape and our food plants and what we're growing agriculturally, we start to kind of see a change in context. So someone like this Virginia tenuta goes out and eats all of the little kind of herby stuff growing on the ground. They love things like alfalfa, they love grasses. Honestly, they love a lot of the things that people who are growing a garden or a farm or a big alfalfa field, maybe don't want to see a ton of these caterpillars out there. And these are native caterpillars. They become really important pollinators as adults. They become a day flying moth who is active in the midsummer and pollinates a lot of our flowers like goldenrods and things that are really important keystone plants for a ton of different species. However, these caterpillars can be pretty sensitive to things like pesticide use and biocontrol. A lot of people use like bacterial or fungal ways to control caterpillars and to eat the caterpillar instead of them eating our plants. So we always like to encourage people when we can to create both a human habitat and insect habitat. So if you're someone who has a farm or you're someone who has a garden, there's a lot of research now that's showing that even a little tiny edge around your garden or your farm that is a wild habitat where you don't treat it, you don't rake it or mow it, that can provide just enough habitat to keep these alive and keep them happy and maybe still balance with our human habitats. That doesn't work for everybody and it doesn't work for every control method, but it is maybe a better compromise than trying to tell everyone to be one extreme or another. We're still trying to figure it out. There's not a lot of great information or a lot of great data yet about how insect populations change and the best ways for us to interact with them. It's still a pretty new field in science. It is, it's getting on a couple decades old at this point, but it's new in the big scheme of things. All right, we're going to show a few more cool springtime caterpillars. So if you are, as you're listening to us talk and seeing caterpillars on the screen, if you are coming up with questions or just really cool things you've always wanted to see, feel free to raise your hand and we'll get to you as we're talking. Before I pass this off to Bridget, I would like to show one more really cool caterpillar because this is another unknown species. This is a caterpillar that we have no idea what it is. Well, that's actually not totally true. All right, when you see the caterpillar, raise your hand. Bridget, can you point to it?
Caterpillar is head right here, and then our body goes all the way back to there.
This is a caterpillar we've been raising since last June.
Actually, yeah.
Yeah.
Second, I panicked that
Yeah.
to the wrong
This
end.
one's challenging. So this caterpillar is almost a full year old at this point, which is really rare for caterpillars. They tend to have maybe a month and a half of time as a caterpillar, and they spend most of their life hibernating, either as a caterpillar that's shriveled up in the leaf litter or maybe as a pupa or chrysalis over winter. But this caterpillar only eats lichen, and only eats one very specific type of lichen. It eats beard lichens. So these really long, kind of scruffy strands of green lichen growing off the trees. That's this caterpillar's favorite. And this might look similar to another unknown species that I showed a photo of earlier. This is another Zanthlognatha, or another litter moth caterpillar. So we know roughly what group it's in. We kind of know what its family is. We even maybe know who its immediate family is, its genus. We know a lot of the caterpillars it should be related to, but we don't know exactly what species, exactly what type this is. It's, as far as we know, something that has never been reported before. We don't know what it looks like when it turns into a moth. We don't know how long its life cycle takes. We don't know what it looks like when it becomes a pupa or a chrysalis. And we've been trying to keep this thing alive for almost a year now. And it's just very slowly eating all of these lichens. And maybe one day we'll get to find it, or maybe it won't be successful and we won't get to see them off. So we'll have to go out and find another of these caterpillars and hope that it's the same unknown species. There is one bit of hope for us if we don't get it to make it through its full life cycle to a moth. We do still get to send the caterpillar off to go get its DNA or its genes tested, and maybe it will match up or not match up with something we have data for if we don't get to see them on stage. And this is one that if you are outside and you have a lot of lichen around, this is one you could potentially find. I think this one was found without a UV light. We have a friend who's very, very good at finding these very weird tiny caterpillars. But this does glow a tiny, tiny bit under UV. So if you have a UV flashlight and want to look at your lichens, you might find a new species. All right, I'll trade off with you and see if there's any cool caterpillars you want to share.
Yeah, so one of my favorite upcoming activities, other than looking around with UV light, is to actually visit some bogs and look at our pitcher plants. So some of you came in early enough, you maybe noticed this around the table. But there are actually caterpillars that live inside of pitcher plants, and I'm not sure if I'll be able to get a great one. Do you actually know which ones have? I know this one has one in it. Was there another one? Just that one. Okay. So if you go to a bog, I don't know how many of you are frequenting bogs, but and you see a pitcher plant, and the pitcher plant is actually like a little bit bubbled out. The top will be sealed off with a little bit of silk. And then there's normally actually a little hole in the bottom too, and that will drain the liquid that is normally inside of a pitcher plant, so then the caterpillar can hang out in there. In this case, again, this will be something really probably on the front row we'll see, but can you see a little bit of, it looks like a little silk is blocking off the entrance there? I don't know if you can see that. So this is a broken off bit of a pitcher plant. And if we are to look inside of it,
Hopefully that light will work.
I'll be able to see through. If I can get, before I even open the whole thing, let me just see if I can get a look inside of here. Maybe. Okay, so we're seeing the silk. So here's the silk covering that's blocking the entrance here. I don't know if we'll be able to really get a look through it.
You turn off the top light if you like.
Oh, maybe. Well, trust me when I say there's a caterpillar inside. They're really cool. They look like almost like little gummy worms.
If you want, I can gently feel this.
Yeah, you want to open that up while I'm looking at some other stuff? And then they turn into a really cool moth that looks, apparently I'm really good at relating the way things look to food because the moth looks very sherbety. It has a lot of bright like yellows and kind of reddish pink colors to it. But something else that we can look at while we're waiting is another really cool story here. So something you might find this time of year are tussock moth eggs. So our egg masses here. So
I don't know why it was moving, you couldn't see it, it's getting ready to shed towards the
oh,
mold.
that's exciting.
So a lot of caterpillars, well, all caterpillars are just like snakes. They have to shed their skin to grow a bigger body and a bigger skin. That caterpillars and other insects shed much more intensely than snakes do. They shed all the skin on their eyes. They even shed their breathing tubes, which is, you want to learn more about that, come to another caterpillar lab program.
So before we jump back to the pitcher plant, so this is actually this thing that looks just like a bunch of foam is a egg mass of the tussock moth. So tussocks are one of the ones that can make some people itchy with their hairs. Kind of just looks like a bunch of foam on a leaf here. Really interesting thing about the tussocks is that the females, which this female is no longer with us, but the females are actually, oh, she's a little bit with us. The females are actually wingless. So as an adult, they have these kind of little nubby wings. I don't know if you can kind of see that at the bottom. Yeah, there. So they kind of have these little like vestigial, useless nubby wings there. But they can't fly, so they have to call the males to them with their pheromones. The males have some fluffy antenna. So for being tiny, they've got those kind of big fluffy antenna on them, and they'll kind of smell with their antenna the pheromones of the females, and they can come and find them, and then they'll mate and lay eggs, and they'll lay that big tuft of foamy egg mass. But you'll start to maybe see some of these egg masses hatching around this time of year. So this might be something you'll go out and be able to see.
On tussock.
Well, on really any plant, they get called tussocks because the caterpillars have tufts of hairs that look a lot like the tussock.
Yeah, so the definition of tussock is like a tall clump of grass in an open field, and the caterpillars have these tufts of hair down their backs that basically look like that, which is why they got
These caterpillars actually really love glossy buckthorn, which is an invasive plant here. And they're one of the few caterpillars that can be reliably found on an invasive plant, which is good for us. We want things eating it. Another cool point about these moths, the males will actually come to lights and put up a big bright light at night, but the females, because they can't fly, won't come to lights. The only way to see the female stage is either to raise the caterpillar all the way through its life cycle or to go out at night and get really lucky with your flashlight.
And we're gonna move back over to our little gummy pitcher plant caterpillar. So this will be tucked in those pitcher plants if you happen to find them out in the bogs. They tend to be, and this one I guess it is pre-shed, so it looks a little bit weirder than regular, but they kind of are like a little purpley red color. This one's a little bit yellowy, but kind of a cool concept to think that there's a caterpillar living in a pitcher plant.
They said it just shed.
Oh, it's getting ready to shed.
So this little kind of darker spot that almost looks like a nose, that's actually his entire head capsule. All of the skin or the exoskeleton that was covering his entire face being pushed forward by this new bigger head that he's building in underneath. And that little semicircle, it kind of looks like a comma. Those are his new eyes.
And then, yeah, so imagine all the little caterpillar heads you're walking by on
That
a day.
caterpillar was in that picture all the way from probably August or September, all the way up until yesterday when we crawled out to the bog and found it. And we'll get to raise it through its life cycle and then release it as an adult moth to go lay more eggs and more pitcher plants.
Well, another one that some people maybe saw over on the back table, which is a favorite of mine. If I put this under, moving. So I was gonna say, does anyone notice the caterpillar on here? But this is one of our bark mimicking caterpillars, so, it's one of our Telepi. And it normally is staying pretty still because as soon as it moves, it kind of gives its camouflage away. But this caterpillar is cool in that it has something called phenotypic plasticity. So it can actually change color to match what it's on. But it's not like an instantaneous change, kind of like a chameleon, it walks over, it can change color. These actually, we're talking about caterpillars shedding their skin. They'll match what they're on when they molt. So right now it matches pretty well with this apple branch that it's on. It's kind of got some red coloration, just like the branch does. Now we're seeing its head walk up the screen there. But if it were to shed next on like a birch tree, which is really white and pale in color, this will almost look like white camo. It'll be very light in color, and will blend in that way. And I'll get to you. I see you with your hand up. They also have these special hairs around their body, which helps to blend, their kind of blur the line between them and the branch. So another really helpful tool for them to camouflage really well. So if you had just like a round caterpillar on a round branch, you'd probably see the line. You might see like a shadow in between the two. Those hairs, they can really flatten and wrap around the branch that they're on, which really kind of, like I said, blurs that line between them. And they have a couple other defenses too. You see kind of that dark spot and the little yellow in there. It almost looks a bit like an eye. So when the camouflage hasn't worked for them and they feel threatened, they can actually hunch their backs a little bit and they really kind of show off that eye spot. So another kind of defense. And underneath, I don't know if they'll let us see it, but maybe I can. Underneath, they have all these stripes as well. So they have this kind of bright coloration underneath, or if they needed to, and we'll see if it'll last for like 5 seconds here, we can maybe see. So hold on.
You have to really make them mad.
Yeah, you can kind of see a little hint maybe of some yellow and black underneath there. There we go. You see, so it will actually rear up and show off this striped stomach, and it's contrasting colors, which a lot of times these bright contrasting colors are kind of warning colors in the wild. So lots of levels of defense for this guy, but mostly it's that camouflage and really blending in. So definitely a fun one if you happen to touch a branch and it feels a little squishy and starts to walk away. Hey, I think you found a caterpillar.
This time of year is really good for that. A lot of our bark mimics are early spring caterpillars before the leaves start to be kind of protective covering.
That and some of our twig mimics as well. So this is an example. Oh yeah, we can. But
So this question is prompted by the changing colors to match the background. From what little I know about squids and stuff, is there a measure of any sort of their intelligence?
oh, question. There's some research out there that talks about like sentience and things like that. As far as I know, not so much about like cognition and things.
Yeah.
I don't know, unless you know of something else.
Caterpillars are, the way they change color is a little bit different than the way a cephalopod or a squid or an octopus might.
Oh, I can dive into that if you want, but
Yeah, they do have little simple color or eye spots and color receptors on their body called pixeli. They're basically very, very simple eyes on their stomach or humans on their teeth that tell them what color they're sitting on. And we don't actually know exactly how that causes a color change in their body, whether that triggers some kind of direct chemical change or if there's some other mechanism or process that's happening in their body. We do know that caterpillars and other arthropods, animals with hard exoskeletons or hard shells, have something called a dispersed nervous system, where they have kind of a bigger set of 3 ganglion, kind of like little mini brains in their head. And then every segment of their body, every segment you see kind of defined by lines, has its own smaller ganglion, so even minier mini brain. And we know that some of the signals that those eyes or their physical senses, like their touch or like their heat senses, go directly to those tiny ganglion instead of to the bigger ganglion, their brain. So parts of their body might be responding kind of independently of the rest of the caterpillar. So it might be that they have a very different type of intelligence than what we understand intelligence or cognition might be. And what that means for how they understand the world, how they experience it, we might never know.
I just checked the time and we are at the end, but I just want to show off. So this is one of our twig mimics. Some of them even have like these lumps and bumps on them to look a bit like a fresh bud coming in or part of the branch, or some of them even also have like little cleft heads and look a bit like a broken off branch. but this is one of our fence geos.
That one might be getting ready to shed.
And I was gonna say, this one actually also looks pre-shed. Yeah, so I guess any last minute questions or?
Well, just say something about that, the string.
Oh, yeah, so this was the strand I was mentioning, earlier when, did you already show off the strand? No, that was
No,
the
yeah.
new one, yeah, so, this is the silk strand that I was talking about earlier, so they have the little spinneret under their mouth that they can create silk, so all caterpillars create it, they just kind of use it for different purposes, so this one kind of has created an anchor to the branch, so if it gets knocked off, it'll be like dangling and then it can crawl up. Other caterpillars use their silk to build their cocoons. Some will use it to wrap a leaf around themselves. Some will use it to stick petals on their backs to blend in and look like the flower that they're feeding on. So all different types of things, but this one is particularly using it kind of as like that anchor. And sometimes that's one of the things, like when you go out looking for caterpillars, you gotta like change your perception and the way you're looking at things. You might catch like a little glimpse of like the sun gleaming off a line of silk, and that might be something that catches your eye enough to let you know that there's something there. And yeah, the silk is kind of shimmery. But yeah, this is what, like, as I mentioned earlier, when if you see like inchworms dangling out of the tree, they're hanging down from their silk.
Is there a relationship between the strength of a caterpillar silk and a spider silk?
Sort of yes, sort of no. So caterpillar silk it's not exactly the same composition as spider silk, but it has very similar properties in a lot of cases. So caterpillar silk is pretty strong. It's not, as far as I understand, as strong as spider silk. But one of the reasons we make silk clothing from caterpillar silk is because it is very strong, it's really durable, and it doesn't really react with a lot of other things. So it doesn't break down very easily. There's not very many animals or like bacteria and things that can eat it. So you get silk lasting a very long time, and not having to do it cleaned and repaired as quickly as other fibers might. I don't actually know. I don't know if anyone's done. Someone has to have done actual like material science with the silk, but I don't know any off the top of my head.
I saw a hand back there.
On a practical level, for the benefit of somebody going on for the first time, they have a regular headlamp, they've
Yeah.
got their UV flashlight. What advice could you give to maximize someone's chances for success in terms of the time in the evening, at night? So the early,
Yeah.
later, better, what kind of habitat? You talked about looking at the trees, but also going to the bogs. Is one place particularly?
It's really hard, because it just varies so greatly by species. So there's definitely things that are a little bit more active at certain times of night than others. Obviously habitat depends on what type of food source the certain caterpillars kind of into. I mean, it does seasonally, like this time of year is a lot of the types of caterpillars we were talking about. So, I mean, numbers wise, I think just looking in an open field right now or, yeah,
Like
most grasses.
Plants that send out buds really early. So
Yeah,
are
early
really
bud.
Or so things like cherries, maples, apples, you have them, blueberries and other heaths like maleberry.
Yeah.
But later in the year, in the summer, if you have sort of a mixed successional habitat, so things where you have really early growing plants, maybe you have older plants, you have a diversity of plant species and plant sizes, so things that are growing in the undergrowth, things that are kind of shrubby, then you have bigger trees. Anytime you have a habitat that has a lot of diversity like that, you're going to maximize your time spent outside. So just the more you have, the more you're going to see. We really like power line cuts. If you can find one that's accessible, I can't remember the exact. There's a little walking trail on a cut here close to Concord that's really well known for its birding, and you'll go out to that power line cut if you want to see whippoorwills in a few months. That's a pretty good spot if you can access those places legally and you're comfortable walking in habitats like that. Trail side edges, roadside edges, if you have a safe road, really anywhere that's kind of an edge habitat is a great place to start. Otherwise, it really is just time spent outside and time developing your eye for some of these animals.
Yeah, and I will say, like, yeah, like different, like having the diversity of habitat, it's like those different levels, because even with just like a headlamp, if you look up into the trees, like you can sometimes see just like the silhouette of a caterpillar on the other side of a leaf and that kind of thing. So just taking the time to look at different levels, and that's why like the diverse habitat is helpful, because you're hedging your bets by having a lot of options, and we do really think there's probably a caterpillar out there on every different type of plant pretty much. So the more plants you have available to look at, the more likely you're gonna find something. But this time of year, I mean, we've had a lot of success going out in some of the open fields and stuff, but yeah, definitely the early bud things as well makes sense, early plants.
It seems the mercury vapor lights are the standard light in all apartments.
Yes.
Right out here, those mercury vapor lights are right essentially next to woods and habitat where you expect a lot of natural things. What if you just went out there essentially now?
Yeah.
And put up a sheet?
Absolutely.
Would there things that become at this time of year?
Yeah, definitely. We'll see things. I unfortunately forgot a couple of examples of the moths we are catching already at this time of year. You're going to see a lot of the LBMs, the little brown moths. If you are a mushroom forager, you might know little brown mushrooms. So that is part of this whole group of moths about the size of a quarter to $1/2 that are all kind of triangular to rectangular in shape, and they're all varying shapes and
Well,
around.
do you just do that? I mean, theoretically, it doesn't take much to take a sheet and poles to put it up.
Yeah.
So you could just go out there in the parking lot anywhere and put them
Yeah.
up and the police arrive to say.
Exactly. We unfortunately, a lot of like parking lots and gas stations have started shifting their lights. But historically, gas station lights and parking lot lights have been kind of the best spots to go catch weird moths when you're on a road trip. So you just stop at 2 o'clock in the morning at a little like overhang on the side of a wall, and if you have a bright enough light, either a sodium lamp or a mercury vapor lamp, you get some cool moths.
I think most of the lights we see out
Yeah.
in parking lots, even out here,
Yes, yeah.
are mercury vapor lights.
Yeah, it's one of the challenges with parking lot lights does tend to be the height. So I would recommend,
Well, the light would be hot,
yeah,
but if you put a sheet up, it
mm,
would reflect off.
it would. Maybe I should back up to why we think moths are attracted to lights in the first place. For a long time, we didn't really know exactly why moths were attracted to light, and there was an idea that maybe they were navigating using it. It turns out we think they're a little bit more like fish underwater using the light to orient to the sky. They have little light sensors on the top of their body that tells them this is how you stay horizontal. When you get a mercury vapor lamp or another light that puts out a lot of UV light, like that's similar to the sun or to the moon, all of a sudden you have this really bright light shining right here, and the moth goes, "Ooh, that's horizontal."
So what you're saying is, even though the sheet is very bright to us, because
Yes.
it's being reflected off the mercury vapor light, the moths
Moths
would
are
be
still gonna be up here.
up there on the street.
Exactly, yeah. So they'll be kind of spiraling in around trying to orient to that light. Some of them will still get caught by the sheet, so
So
you'll
when
get a
you,
few.
when you do these field events, like when you go to Ohio, that mercury vapor light's right there.
Yes,
on
yeah,
top.
you want it shining either on the light or on the sheet or in front of the sheet.
He's gonna be the one running it, so it's gonna be whenever we finish here. Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Honestly, if you bring binoculars and you want to go stare at the bright light from binoculars, that might be a way to see them off. But really, in that case, it maybe is more effective to go out with a flashlight and see who is kind of staying down lower on the ground before they get stuck up the lights. And mothing isn't a great, it's a good tool to get started seeing all the different moths that might be in your area, but there are a lot of moths and a lot of other insects that don't come to light. So that's one of the reasons we think they're orienting using the light to stay horizontal, but we don't know for sure. There's tons and tons of species that don't actually get attracted to light. There's some species where both the males and females can fly, but only the males of one species that come to light and the females of another species. Like, so there's still a little bit of mystery there.
Any other questions?
All right, round of applause for Sarah and Bridget. You guys hang around a little bit
Yeah.
and stuff?
Yeah, as we're kind of getting ready for the show, if you would like to see any of the microscope caterpillars up close, you're welcome to come meet some up here. We do have a few very big caterpillars in the back as well. So, or if you have more questions, feel free to come ask us.
So,